Everybody, Andrew Cuneo here. I'm back for the first time in a while with a new deck tech. We've finally gotten a set that has shaken up, one of the constructed formats on Arena some. The format is Alchemy, which for a lot of people, you won't notice that it's been shaken up because you haven't been playing it. But there were a couple of important changes to Alchemy in addition to the release of Baldur's Gate. They've changed a few other cards, and there's the additions of Alchemy Streets of New Capenna, which I didn't really explore very much. So it is a pretty new format to try out, so I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm going to start out with a mono red deck, which it's been a while since mono red was really a top tier strategy in any of the constructed formats on Arena. And I don't know if it's going to prove to be a top-tier strategy this time. We do get some powerful new tools, though, that I think are certainly worth trying out. So let's start there. One of the new cards is Uthgardt Fury. So this is an enchantment that deals 4 damage to any target for 3 mana. It's been a while since there's been a card printed into a standard legal set that did damage at that rate that you could deal to the opposing player, which this can hit any target. So you can just play it as 3 mana, 4 damage to your opponent if you want, which makes it a card that, you feel pretty good just putting 4 of it in your deck, in your main deck. Whereas, a card that could only hit a creature, or could only hit a creature or a planeswalker, that's a little bit harder to include. But you get more from this card. You also get damage isn't removed from creatures your opponents control during cleanup steps. And that's not the greatest ability ever, but it's useful. It's going to matter in some games. It means that you're going to be able to profitably alpha strike into a large blocker more readily with this card. Also, it means that if you have, access to multiple burn spells, but you don't have the mana to cast them in one turn, you could maybe, over the course of 2 turns, kill a large creature. So that's a useful ability, and it's an ability that hasn't generally existed on red cards. There's the Soulscar Mage, which is a card that is legal in Historic and Explorer, which does something similar but slightly more powerful because that puts -1/-1 counters. This does not reduce the power of the creature ever, so not quite as good of an effect, but still a useful thing. I think this is a pretty strong card. Then we have perhaps the best of the cards, Mephit's Enthusiasm. So this is just a straight-up huge upgrade to Thundering Rebuke, which is a card people played some in Standard. So 2 mana, 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker, and then any of the excess damage gets converted into a boon, which that's a mechanic from Baldur's Gate. And the boon basically says when you cast your next creature spell, it perpetually gets +X+O, where X is the amount of extra damage you had. So if you've played Alchemy before, this card is very similar to the card I have in the sideboard, Molten Impact. Molten Impact instead of giving you a boon that boosts your next creature, it gives you some additional damage that's going to splash onto a new target. The Enthusiasm is, I think, pretty appropriate for a deck that's looking to play a lot of creatures and attack with creatures to deal damage to win. That's why I've got 4 in my main deck. Molten Impact would be more for like a controlling or a mid-range deck, I would say. So I think this is a very, very strong card. It's really not that different from Molten Impact. I think in this deck it's probably slightly better than Molten Impact, but Molten Impact is also an excellent card. We've also got Tiefling Outcasts. So this is a new 1-drop that is clearly worse than Kumano Faces Kakkazan. Kumano Faces Kakkazan is definitely the best 1-mana red card you can put in your deck in Alchemy or in Standard. I think this card is in contention for the second best. So it's a 1/1 for 1. It has this double team ability, which if you haven't played with it, it means that when you attack with it the first time, you get a new copy of the card into your hand. It's conjured, so it comes out of nothing. It doesn't come from your deck. It doesn't come from your sideboard. It comes from, nowhere. You just get an extra copy. But both the creature in play and the one you're getting in your hand lose the double team ability, so it doesn't keep chaining. It's like a one-shot Legion Angel that doesn't use sideboard space. And then it has this other ability, other demons, devils, imps, and tieflings you control get +1/+0. So the second copy, they buff each other. So if you attack with this, you get the second copy, you put them both into play, they're both 2/1s. And any additional tieflings or demons, devils, imps you get are going to be buffed as well. So it's kind of like a lord that buffs itself once you get to attack once and cast the second copy. It's not the greatest card ever, but it is somewhat strong. I did do a search for other demons, devils, imps, and tieflings, and there's really not much if you're trying to stick to mono red. And even if you're willing to branch out into a second color, there just aren't a lot of good creatures to play that have these types. One thing that is cool about this card, in Alchemy specifically, is Faceless Haven is nerfed down to being a 3/3, but Faceless Haven, it's all of these creature types. So in a sense, the Tiefling Outcasts, if you have one of them, you've unnerfed your Faceless Havens. If you have more than one, you're coming out ahead. So this guy is allowing me to play with unnerfed Faceless Havens, which is nice. I do have one other Tiefling in my deck. This guy is in my deck because it's a Tiefling. It's an okay 2-drop. So it's a 2/2 first strike that is a Tiefling. So if you have an Outcast, it's a 3/2 first strike. That's nice. Then it has this Specialize ability. If you haven't played with Specialize yet, Specialize abilities have a mana cost, which in this case is 6. And they also require you to discard a colored spell or a card that has a basic land type. So in this deck, it would be Snow-Covered Mountains or my red cards that I would be discarding. You can't discard Faceless Haven, Sokenzan, or Den of the Bugbear. And then you get to convert it into one of the other sides of the card. This is one of the notorious 6-sided cards from Baldur's Gate. So in this case, you're getting the red side, which is a 4/4 first strike haste. The turn it enters the battlefield, creature can't block. And also this creature can never block. But it's a first strike haster. In this deck, you wouldn't really want to block with it in general. This card is special in that you can specialize from the graveyard. So if this thing dies as a 2/2, eventually later on in the game, you can spend 6 mana and discard a card to get it back as a 4/4 haste, which that sounds really good. In practice, this card is very reminiscent of a card from Amonkhet called Earthshaker Kenra. Earthshaker Kenra, though, I think is just a straight-up better card. This thing also has, if you were to play a 2-color deck, if you could bring it back as a white card, the white ability is substantially better than the mono-red ability. But that requires you to have white cards or planes in your deck, which I don't have those, so I don't have access to that ability. I would say this thing is nothing special, but I wanted to try out the Tiefling Outcasts, and I wanted like a little bit more Tieflings to go with it. So those are the brand new cards. If you haven't played Alchemy before, I also have access to this 2-drop, which was just in the Chromatic Cube. This is a really, really strong 2-drop werewolf. If it switches to night, it becomes a 2/2 double strike on a 2-drop. It's potentially going to attack for 4 damage on turn 3 if your opponent couldn't do anything to keep it from flipping to night. It also has this ability that's kind of reminiscent of a Robber of the Rich, which you're guaranteed to get spells from your opponent's deck. Sometimes it's really good, but it depends on what's in your opponent's deck. If your opponent's deck has a lot of cards that are useful for your deck to be casting, it's going to be great. If you're playing against a control deck that has a bunch of like sweepers and counters and stuff in it, this ability's not going to do much. But still just an excellent, excellent card. I think clearly better than any of the 2-drops that are legal in just straight up standard. Also, Reckless Stormseeker is another werewolf. And if you've ever played a deck that has some werewolves, just kind of the more you have, the more likely that it becomes that your subsequent copies will get to be cast when it's already night. Because, if you start the day-night cycle on turn 2 of the game, eventually it's probably going to flip to night, and that makes your subsequent werewolves much better. The Storm Charge, if you get to play this as Storm Charge Slasher, the turn it comes into play, it's incredible. It's still very good. On the front side, Thundering Raiju, which is a card from Kamigawa, I think, it's perfectly suited for a mono-red deck. There just hasn't been a good mono-red deck for it, so it's going to continue to show up here. A couple Voldaren Epicures. This is just a curve filler. I think this is the best 1-drop that isn't Kumano faces Kakkazan or maybe the Outcasts. There's also a 2/1 vampire you can play. I haven't been very impressed by that. There's Rabbit Battery, which I think is pretty bad. It's especially bad in a deck where all the 3 and 4 mana cards already have haste. This is not a great card. It's kind of a curve filler. Some Frostbites. This is nice. I think Frostbite is a good removal spell. And because I'm playing Alchemy, I can play with the nerfed Faceless Haven, so I can reasonably turn this on to make it better than Strangle. Just because it's an instant. Being an instant in this deck is a pretty big deal. Because if you're going to leave up a removal spell, if you can't spend your mana on your main phase, and having a removal spell that you can cast and then get to untap and have access to all your mana, so you can play a haste guy, you can activate a creature land, it's a pretty big deal. Sometimes you're going to just get extra damage because it's an instant over Strangle, and dealing damage is what this deck is all about. One card that's not included in my deck is Bloodthirsty Adversary, which is an excellent 2-drop, but I think it's kind of a casualty of playing with Uthgardt Fury, that you just don't wind up with very many instants and sorceries in your deck, which really hurts the Bloodthirsty Adversary. Moving on to the sideboard. The sideboard is a bit of a work in progress. This is often the case in these videos because I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be trying to sideboard against yet. And also I'm just, I've played maybe 10 matches with this deck so far, and I've been doing really well with it, but I haven't really encountered a lot of stuff where I felt I needed something in my sideboard specifically. So it's just some additional removal spells, Molten Impact, Burning Hands, Abrade, Frostbite, so I can get the right amount of removal for a matchup. A lot of the times, if I'm playing against another creature deck, I'm going to want to be boarding in some of this efficient creature removal, probably taking out cards like Voldaren Epicure, which is not a very effective card if it's going to be getting blocked. I've got some Town-Razer Tyrants in my deck. This is just to give me more of a card that's good against like a more controlling mid-range deck. If I want to board out Frostbites, I might want to bring in a card like that. Some Rending Flames. This is an important card, I think, because there's this new Planeswalker in Baldur's Gate that I think is named Tasha. Let's see if we can find it. I don't know the name. Yeah. This card, Tasha, the Unholy Archmage. I think this is one of the strongest constructed cards in Baldur's Gate, and it's particularly good against a deck that has low toughness creatures, which this deck does. You definitely want to be able to kill this the turn they play it and plus it, so you want to be able to do 5 damage. And conveniently, Rending Flame deals 5 damage. Most of the people that play Tasha are playing also like Rafine in their deck. There's another Esper card that tends to have 4 toughness when it comes into play. There's not a ton of spirit. Sometimes people have Skyclave Apparition. This is mostly just you want a spell that can deal 5 damage to a Planeswalker, and the fact that it can also kill high toughness creatures is nice. That's why I don't have a card like Pithing Needle in my deck, because I want a card that I'm going to be able to kill whatever they play on turn 4 with this card. This is another new card, Flames of Moradin. It's kind of like Shatterstorm if you've been playing for a long time. So you destroy 3 artifacts. Then there's this incredibly strange ability that you get duplicate copies of the non-token artifacts you destroyed into your hand. And you can play them for red rather than their mana cost, but then they go away at the end of the turn. This card is in my sideboard specifically because I think it might be good against Oni Cult Anvil decks. That's where I want to try it. One Volatile Arsonist in my sideboard. I like having this in my sideboard, just I want to board into a deck that is better at grinding through a mid-range deck. I think Volatile Arsonist in particular is really good against Lolth, which is not a super popular card right now, but maybe someone will have that, maybe someone will have something else like that. And then one Shatterskull Smashing. I like having 1 land in my sideboard if I'm going to be boarding in a lot of the 4 and 5 mana cards in my deck, especially if my plan is to cut cheap cards like Frostbite, which doesn't do a lot against more controlling decks. For a more high impact card, I'm upping my mana curve, so I want to have the option of boarding in an additional land. This land, in those matchups, hitting creatures is not that big of a deal, but the fact that I have a land that can also hit Planeswalkers is pretty good. If I need to clean up a Wandering Emperor potentially, where they've got, they've gotten a 2/2 and they've got a Wandering Emperor still in play that's got some loyalty on it, this card can do that all by itself. That's why it's in the sideboard. One Chandra Dress to Kill. I really do not think this is a very good card in most games of Magic, but if you're playing against someone that is a more controlling deck that cannot attack it with damage, it's serviceable. And like I said, I'm going to, in those matchups, tend to board into a higher curve, so having something that can produce additional mana is nice. So that's the deck. I'm going to run through a Alchemy metagame challenge with it, and we'll see how well it does. All right, no 1-drop, but pretty reasonable curve. Opponent has Alpine Meadow in their deck. Does this thing count? It counts as a mountain and a plain, so if you're playing the specialized cards, you could discard this to it. This happens sometimes in the metagame challenges where you're playing against somebody. These are the cards they've got, so they've decided to enter this event. I would not advise putting Ninja's Kunai in your constructed deck. Spirited Companion is fine in very limited circumstances. So if I wanted to, I could Mephit's Enthusiasm, Spirited Companion, and make a really burly Voldaren Epicure. I think instead we'll make a substantially less burly Voldaren Epicure, but still slightly better. So I'm getting an extra point of power on my Epicure from Mephit's Enthusiasm. That's, you know, certainly useful. Two, 3 lifelink. Rude. Let's loot away this mountain. And I'll let them trade their companion with my Epicure. They've got a card on Foretell. If it's Starnheim Unleashed, that would maybe be a little scary. I chose to chump block. Even if they have Starnheim Unleashed, the Fury would help in that scenario because I would be able to probably still attack. It's Doomscar. Okay. Not the worst. Commanding Voice, discarding a Samurai. So my choices are attack with the Bugbear for 4. But if I do that, I miss out on this counter. And I don't get to spend the rest of my mana. I think I'm just going to play the Epicure. Play a new Kumano faces Kakkazan. I'll hold this in my hand. It's pretty likely I'll just play it next turn and attack with the Den of the Bugbear, but there's no need to play it. Invoke Justice. Holy cow. 6/7 lifelink. I do not like that. And a Rabbit Battery. Okay. So they're going to gain a tremendous amount of life from that 6/7. Is this justice? I don't know. Should I just take it? They're going up to 13. I'm going to have 8. 12 damage. Is that right? 2, 4. Could also just chump this thing with one of the tokens. I think that's what I should do. Because I'm 1 damage short of killing them. There aren't that many cards. I don't know, are there even any cards I could draw that would actually cause me to kill them? I don't think so. I'm going to leave one guy back to block. It's Goro Goro. Oh no, they can make the dragons? I think I'm losing at this point. If they make the dragon, they didn't make the dragon. They should have made the dragon. It's a failure to make a dragon penalty. Okay, if they're willing to trade their cards off like this, I'm probably still going to win. Over time, Uthgardt Fury is going to wear down this Golden Tail Disciple. Not very quickly, unfortunately. I hope they don't invoke Justice back the Golden Tail Disciple once I finally manage to kill it. It's gained them so much life. Ooh, Tiefling Outcasts. Nice. But I think I should hold those in my hand. I think I want to trade the Faceless Haven with the Golden Tail Disciple if they attack this turn. I also have Etchings of Kumano in play, so if it dies, it's not going to the graveyard, so they can't invoke Justice it back. That's good. I've done like 45 damage so far this game. I don't know what this... Oh, it's 3/3 haste, and it makes your other guys. Okay. It's a high-speed hover bike. Wow. Indestructible does not work very well when you have Uthgardt's Fury in play. It doesn't really matter that I'm removing this counter. I guess I needed to get the counter off of it, but it still would have died as soon as it had no counters. Because Indestructible doesn't prevent your card from receiving damage, it just makes it so that it doesn't die from having taken the damage, but then just as soon as it stops having Indestructible, it's still taking the damage. If that makes sense. Oh, and because I have Etchings of Kumano in play, they don't get that sushi trigger. Nice. I'm also cutting down on their choice of things to reanimate. Revitalize, so much life gain. Okay, they obviously should have exiled my enchantments there, but it would have died anyway. How to sideboard against their deck had just some of everything. Guess the real question is Frostbite a good card? They have some of this 3/3 guy. They actually had multiple different 3/3 guys. Yeah, I think I just want sideboard. The only card that I'm maybe not completely happy with is the Voldaren Epicure. But they didn't really have... They had the Spirited Companion, which was a good blocker for it. I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. They put me on the play. Okay. May wind up squandering the +1/+1 counter from this Kumano faces Kakkazan if I don't draw a creature to play next turn. That's fine, though. This card's a really good card, even if you don't always get the counter. But I drew a creature. This is a really good draw. I didn't talk about it when I was going over my deck, but the reason that I only have 3 Faceless Havens in my deck is because I want to be able to play these triple 1-drop draws where you have access to double red on turn 2. Also, there's some double red cards in the deck, so you don't want... A draw that's like Mountain, Faceless Haven is really bad. And by shaving from 4 down to 3 Faceless Havens, you actually reduce a substantial amount of the too many non-basic, or the too many colorless lands draws. And they did this turn. Not sure. Let's attack and find out how much damage this is. Not quite, but I am still just going to play this and go face, because if they can't deal with my creatures, they're going to die. If they play a sweeper to deal with my creatures, then Uthgardt Fury will just finish them off. It's time for some sushi. I think that Tiefling Outcasts performs substantially better on the play than it does on the draw. Thankfully, I'm on the play. We've got basic planes, no play. So who knows what's in their deck. Games like this are where the Tiefling Outcast kind of shines, because I started with a 1-drop and I'm up to 2 2/1s in play, which is pretty nice. Kind of being brickwalled by this Angel of Unity, which is sad. That would have been a good turn to draw Mephit's Enthusiasm. Is this mono white Angels? Appears to be. Should I attack with everything? I don't think I should attack with the second Tiefling Outcast. If I attack with everything, they're definitely going to block the 2/1 Tiefling Outcasts. Okay, they didn't block at all. They certainly should have blocked the Voldaren Epicure. It's a Giada, okay. Youthful Valkyrie, that's quite large. So this game's officially gotten out of hand. I needed you several turns ago. So I can kill the Giada, which is a start. I don't think I have an attack, though. I think I'm just going to kill Giada. Play this. Hope that the top card of my deck is another Thundering Raiju. I'm not even sure that would do it, but it's probably my best draw. Never seen this card before. Beginning of your end step, if you gain 4 or more life this turn, get a 4/4. I don't think there's anything I can draw, but let's see. Wow. Angels defeat Tieflings. Does Rending Volley, is it just spirits or is it spirits/angels? It's just spirits. I might still want that card. This is, matchups like this is why I have so much single target removal in my deck. I think the Voldaren Epicures are pretty bad, I would say. The removal spells, the more the merrier. Is it an upgrade to change the Furies into Rending Flames? I think Rending Flame is good, but I think I'm going to cut 1 Fury and 1 Rahilda, because Rahilda's legendary, and they don't seem like the kind of deck that's going to kill my creatures all that often. The deck just seemed like it was a pile of angels. So I want this Abrade in my deck. I'm going to say no on the play. Maybe on the draw I will want it. That would have been a good turn to draw a Rahilda. More Unity. Haven't played the card they've buffed yet. What does this do? If you would gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. Fair enough. They're getting a lot of life. It's kind of impressive. Guess I'll kill one of these 1/3s. It gains them 2 life. It's kind of annoying. Okay. There's been a shocking amount of life gain so far in this run. Four, 6, huh? And on the draw, I'm going to board in this Abrade. But what am I going to take out for it? Maybe Karlach, the Raging Tiefling. No, I don't have a strong need to have a Raging Tiefling in this matchup. Turn to Rahilda. Excellent. This is one of those hands with no removal spells, though. It's the way I lost the first game. If they just played Giada this turn, it could be really bad for me. I'm just going to Rending Flame the Giada. I'll do it in their upkeep so I can flip it to Knight. This way, if they play the Righteous Valkyrie, the Rahilda can still attack. And the Stormseeker can attack as well. They probably are not going to be able to play 2 spells this turn. Next turn they might be able to, however. And I'll play this in their upkeep again, just to keep it Knight. They did have Valorous Stance in their deck, but I think if that's how they use their turn as Valorous Stancing their Starnheim Assistant, I'll be fine. Oh, they managed to flip it back to day. Lame. That Valorous stance that the Rahilda just revealed is going to be pretty bad for them. Because I think one of the ways I could get back into this game might have been if they had a Righteous Valkyrie here, but now I can just kill it by attacking with werewolves. A Youthful Valkyrie, that's not a Righteous Valkyrie. They're dead. One land is too few. Okay, this hand looks a lot better. So what should I put on the bottom? This is a mull. I think I'm going to bottom the Karlach. I'm going to go turn 1 Kumano, turn 2 Rahilda, and then we'll see from there. I think the Tiefling Outcast is generally just a somewhat stronger card than the Karlach. Well, this is a strong start. My opponent has played a Gate, the Black Dragon, and I don't know what. Oh, a white-black pathway. Okay. I guess I'll flip it back today. Play the Tiefling Outcasts. Can I give my Tiefling Outcasts unblockable with Curdle? Yeah. Wow. Swarm Saboteur is a cool card. I don't know if it's a constructed playable card, but it is a cool card. Targeted creature. Tiefling Outcasts. I cannot afford to pay, though. Doomscar. Not a strong hit. They're going to 3. Alright, so I'm going to leave this on top because it means that the Den of the Bugbear can be activated for lethal. I didn't talk about this earlier. I meant to bring it up when I was going over the deck. One of the things that has changed in Alchemy that I think really makes Mono Red a lot better is that Meat Hook Massacre got nerfed so it no longer gains life. It used to be the case that if somebody had massacred there, I guess on that board they wouldn't have gained enough life to survive. But a lot of the times, just the first Meat Hook Massacre that somebody cast made it such that they were going to gain enough life that you just couldn't kill them from an aggressive red deck. So this is another just somewhat random assortment of cards deck. I did see the Key to the Archive, so I'll board in Abrade. Also, they had those 1/3s. I don't want my Voldaren Epicure getting blocked by 1/3s. Maybe we'll switch to the higher curve form of the deck. Got to cut a few more things to do this. Probably don't need all those. Maybe I'll just play Rending Volleys instead, in case they have that Tasha card. I have no 2-drop, which saddens me. Maybe I'll draw one. This is another person that put me on the play. What are people doing? In general and constructed, you should, unless your deck is specifically built around some mechanic where you have to be on the draw, you should choose to be on the play, always. Even if you were someone who thought somehow in control matchups it was better to be on the draw, this is not one of those matchups. Against an aggressive mono red deck with 1-drops, you should always, 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 always choose to be on the play when you can. Tiefling synergies. Can we get some Tiefling synergies? Runes. Runes is a deck I have not seen in a while. It's probably going to be a hard matchup for this deck on the draw, given that I didn't draw a great assortment of removal. I'm probably going to have to just Uthgardt Fury one of these visitors this next turn. Like, I can't win if they get a ton of visitor counters. It's just not possible. I guess I could... attack with just the Rahilda and play Karlach plus Frostbite and save the Uthgardt Fury. It's too bad that this is not a snow-covered mountain. If I could cast the Frostbite at instant speed, it would be great. Okay, they decided to chump block. That's good for me. So should I change plans now? And just Fury the Runeforge champion? Because they're probably not going to be able to cast enough enchantments to get this thing out of Frostbite range if there isn't a Runeforge champion in play. I guess I could play the whatever the 2/2 is called that makes their enchantments cheaper. That's not it. Oh, okay, they could do that. So now they are still getting some increased sizing. I'm going to take advantage of the Fury and I'm just going to Frostbite this thing. Wish I hadn't done that now, I suppose. I think the opponent's gone a little bit crazy with chumping this Rahilda. I think they would have been way better off if they had just let me reveal a random card. from the deck once or twice. Untapped land. Excellent. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me, opponent. That's the name of the card I couldn't think of. Jukai Naturalist. Size of the spirits is number of spirits you control, so I'll get rid of the spirit. I guess I'll improve my tiefling too. Tiefling power up. And I think I'll put the counter on the Raiju, even though it does slightly less damage this way. I didn't want them to just trade their 3/2 Naturalist for the Thundering Raiju. A backup Hollowed Haunting. This is certainly a you want all the removal spells you can get type matchup. I'm not really including Shatterskull Smashing in that because it's not really efficient enough. This is another one of those matchups where I'm going to trim at Rahilda just because I don't think they're very likely to kill my Rahilda, like just kill my creatures in general. I think the instant speed is on Rending Volley is better than Uthgardt Fury. I guess I have kind of more removal spells than I can exactly fit here. How many creatures am I going down to? 15 plus the Kumano faces Kakkazan, so that's probably fine. No. No to that one. Okay. I'll bottom the Thundering Raiju just because it's the most expensive card. This Kumano faces Kakkazan into Rahilda start is pretty good, I would say. It's pretty obnoxious for opponents. I guess I'm going to kill the Naturalist. The problem is if they have a Runeforged champion and I give them a turn of like Naturalist, Runeforged champion, they might actually get creatures that are big enough that I couldn't clean them up with a 4 damage card. Yeah, like that. Didn't want that to happen to me, so I played around it. Rather than trying to get them to play the aura into my untapped mana, I'm just going to kill that thing and deal 2 damage and play a 4/2 Rahilda and hope that's good. That last turn, I certainly would have waited to cast the Frostbite if I didn't have anything to attack with. But the potential that, like, they don't even play something for me to Frostbite on their... Like, they don't make a play where I want to play the Frostbite in response to 2-for-1 them. And I'm giving up 2 damage just in the hopes of getting to do it. That's enough that I'm not really interested in waiting. I think we'll just prevent them from having creatures in play. Sadly, I have no runes in my deck to search for with the Runeforge Champion that I revealed. That's not to say that I'm not going to play it eventually, but it is not a high priority. Showdown of the Scalds, though, that will be one that I will be casting once I can afford to do so. I guess I got kind of punished for not leaving up Frostbite. It's not going to matter, but it would have been nice to be able to Frostbite that Spirited Companion on their turn. I'm up against the darkness. Green-red Lizard Blades deck. Okay. Oh, I made it night. That's painful. It's not an auspicious start to a game, especially if they have Tamiyo's Safekeeping or Snakeskin Veil. It's going to be game over. Down to 4. Wow, if it hadn't been actual Snakeskin Veil, if it had been Tamiyo's Safekeeping, I could have at least killed both their guys. Not anymore, though. I want the cheap removal. I think I want Abrade as well if they're playing Reckless Stormseeker and Thundering Raiju. Those seem good. Take out these Epicures, and I'll take out the more expensive Sorcery Speed removal. Do you want Burning Hands? I only saw red creatures. I don't necessarily have any big beefy green creatures. They did have some green in their deck, but all I saw was Snakeskin Veil. I think I'll just go with this. So this buffs this one to a 2/1. I attack. And then I get another one in my hand. This is the first time I've had the multiple Tiefling Outcasts draw. This seems quite strong. Because next turn, if they play a creature, I'm going to Mephit's Enthusiasm it. I'm going to get to attack. And then they're all going to be 4/1s. When I play this next one, I guess one of them is going to be a 6/1 even. I think my opponent has learned the power of the Tiefling Peasants. What? Why would you play such a puny 2-drop? This is one of those awkward hands you get with Frostbite, where I only have one Den of the Bugbear in my deck because I don't want this to come up very often. But now I have a hard choice. Do I want to play the Den of the Bugbear turn 1, and then I'm not going to be able to play it for 3 damage until turn 4, or do I want to risk not being able to play the Thundering Raiju on turn 4? I think I'm going to risk not being able to play the Thundering Raiju on turn 4. Also, my opponent just mulled the 4, so probably it's not going to matter. But if they had had a stronger hand, or a functional hand, it could have mattered a lot. Maybe it's still going to matter. Maybe they're going to do something great this turn. 4/4 Tovolar is pretty great. So I get to draw a card. So you can put counters on creatures defensive that aren't attacking. Oh no. So I'm going to animate my Faceless Haven, double block the Tovolar, deal first strike damage, and try to Frostbite, I think. This can only deal buff your wolves and werewolves, right? Yeah. I don't know that I even need to first strike this down. I probably should. I guess maybe I shouldn't even bother. Doesn't matter if they have Snakeskin Veil now. Their card still dies, and I would just kill them. pretty good hand if they're playing a creature deck. This kind of, like mopey Esper decks, I think are the most popular deck type you can play against in this format. It's the first time seeing them. I've played against a couple of non-competitive decks. Yeah. Forsaken Crossroads on white does not change the fact this is probably a mopey Esper mid-range deck. Do I want to use my blood? I don't think so. I certainly don't want to get rid of the land, and I don't think I want to get rid of either of the removal spells. Mind Spike me. I'm going to send a speedy Tiefling Outcasts on over so we can get that double team action going. People aren't used to playing against an aggressive red deck like this, so that's one of the reasons I'm playing against things like main deck Mind Spike. This is just not on people's radar that you could play against a deck like this. So the question is, should I play around Meathook Massacre? I think the answer is no. I'm just going to dump all these Outcasts on the board. Hit him for 4. Kind of force them to have Massacre. Fragment Reality is a really good card. Not sure that's the right one to have fragmented, though, because they still took damage from this one. They went after the one that still had the double team ability on it, but they still took damage, which means to me they probably didn't have a sweeper in their hand. I'm expecting them to play the Wandering Emperor here, which is why I'm not attacking with this Faceless Haven. Okay, they have the Kaleem Jin guy. I will attack with Faceless Haven in the face of that. It's not even a nerf Faceless Haven, it's a buffed Faceless Haven. It's dying to Iganjo. Lame. Did they gain any life on that? No. They had Vanishing versed so many of my cards. There's no life to be gained. That'll do. So this is the deck I wanted Rending Flame against because of that Tasha card. Also, at the end of that game, they discarded a Herald of Vengeance, which is a very good 4/5 creature in Alchemy. That is another thing that I would want to have access to a card that can deal 5 damage. It's board in Molten Impact and Rending Flames for some of the weaker cards. Try it like that. That Esper deck is something that I had in mind when I constructed my main deck, so it'd be weird if I had to sideboard a ton. I've got the turn 1 Kumano into turn 2 Rahilda start. It takes 3 damage almost definitely from the Shatterskull Smashing. Or perhaps not. I think I'm going to discard the Uthgardt Fury and the Thundering Raiju here. Just because I'm light on lands anyway. I played the Enthusiasm over the Uthgard's Fury because the Fury can deal damage to the person's face. Also, it's possible I hit a 2-drop. Sometimes these decks have, like, a Tenacious Underdog in them. Maybe they could have had Mind Spike in them, something like that. It's kind of annoying. It's really annoying. It's kind of sad, but I think I have to use the Fury to finish off this Wandering Emperor. This is not a good way to attempt to win a game. Just constantly getting 2 for 1. Is this a good card for them to have in their deck after Sideboard? It's kind of just negate, which I would not want in my deck after Sideboarding. So it's definitely not looking good, but they're empty-handed, and it is night, so if I just draw Rahildas and Reckless Stormseekers, we should be in fine shape, or playable shape. My graveyard has been extremely damaged in the making of this game. I've already had 7 cards exiled. They have Infernal Grasp? I hope not. Seems like it though. Oh, they have the Kaleem Jin Emperor. This is a new card that's pretty cool. I think this deck I'm playing against is basically a Croaky's deck. They didn't draw a land. That's less cool for them by quite a lot. They're going to die incredibly quickly. They might have more Kaleem Jin Emperors in their hand, but it's not going to matter. If it flips to night here and I've got 2 of these Storm Charge Slashers in play, they're not getting out of this with Kaleem Jin Emperors. They actually are taking extra damage because they didn't wait until I targeted with my Storm Charge Slashers. They should have waited until I targeted, you know, 1 trigger on each and then tapped one of them, but because they were just frustrated, they did it right away and they wound up taking 2 extra damage. Angry Emperor doesn't do it. Would get them to 5. They would just die to the Stormcharge Slasher. I also have the Faceless Haven that can attack. I don't think there's any single card that could get them out of that. And I don't even think there's any combination of cards for the mana they have that could get them out of that. All right, final match. Yeah, I'll keep it. I'm going to land heavy, but I'm going to get the blood off the Epicure, so I'll eventually be able to fix that. This is a red deck. A multicolored red deck. So who knows what it is, but we'll find out. The Tieflings have arrived to do their Tiefling things. It's a red-black deck. Okay. Probably the kind of red-black mid-range deck that's been very popular in Alchemy for a long time. I think I'm actually going to just attack with this one. It deals 1 less damage, but it means that this is potentially on defense to block this thing, which... it's a pretty big deal not giving somebody a free treasure on the 4th turn of the game. It's not that likely to work, but it is possible for it to work. And I gave up 1 point of damage to do it, so it wasn't that big of a cost. More Fables in the Mirror Breaker. Okay. Going to hit them with a hasty 4/2 Rahilda. Come on, something good off of Rahilda. Meathook Massacre. Not great. Not the worst, though. What are these cards they discarded? Spelldrain Assassins. I tried this card. It was bad. It was really bad. Not that surprised they wanted to discard them all. So I'm going to attack with the Stormseeker because I want to force them to trade off the City Stalker Connoisseur, I think. This is yet another one of those games where the fact that they can't just cast a Meathook Massacre and gain a bunch of life sweeping my board is going to make it so much harder for them to win. It's a night and day difference with these aggressive red decks. The fact that the premier sweeper in the format no longer just gains people a massive amount of life. And they might still have a little bit of game going on here, though, now. They can copy this. So they're going to be at... Well, don't do that, opponent. You need it to block. They go up to 5, but they're going to go down to 4. Are they just dead no matter what I do here? Yeah. Because of the graveyard, they're going to go chump, graveyard trespasser trigger. +1 from the Epicure is 5 exactly. So against this deck, do I want to board in more high-end cards? I might. I do want some of the cheap removal, though, just because of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Like, let's add all this stuff. Maybe trim on Fury and Frostbite. I haven't had to mulligan very much this match, or this run. That's one of the benefits of playing a monocolor deck. I've mulliganed a lot less than my opponents. Like a low curve monocolor deck. Got 24 lands in my deck, which is perhaps even a little on the high side for what my deck needs. But it's nice. I mean, you can comfortably do it because I've got 4 creature lands in my deck. I've got a Shatterskull Smashing, and I've got the Sokenzan. I think I want to just attack with everything. See what they do. They're probably going to let Rahilda through. They don't have good Rahilda block. So I might hit something I want to cast off the Rahilda. They didn't block at all. That kind of surprises me. I think I'm going to kill the Blood Tithe Harvester and play a 3/1 Tiefling Outcasts. I want to kill the Blood Tithe Harvester because one of the cards they could play next turn is City Stalker Connoisseur, which would give them a second blood, which would mean the Blood Tithe Harvester could then kill the Rahilda, which I do not want to happen. Even though I have a second Rahilda in my hand, their deck is not very good at blocking a 3-power first striker, I think. So I want to make sure that they, you know, it's inconvenient for them to answer this Rahilda. Well, okay, they answered it that way. That is an answer. I'm fine with them trading this goblin off for one of my creatures. Probably should have played the Reckless Stormseeker. I'm just going to play... I'm going to play another Rahilda this turn, I guess. Oh, that's not good for me. It's not good at all. Okay, it's going to die. Something at least. They're trying to set up Siphoner plus Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, but there's still a turn-off of being able to do that, which is, I guess, why they blocked. The Molten Impact they got back, though, is going to kill Rahilda plus my big Tiefling Outcasts, I would imagine. So that's not good for me. I have to get the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki off the board. There are too many things that are good for them to copy in their deck. If their hand's weak, I'm in reasonably good shape. That's not weak. One thing that is nice, though, about the Uthgardt Fury, specifically against Invoke Despair, is it gives you an enchantment to sack that, you know, it's wasn't a particularly important card to be sitting in play. So it just makes their... what's it called? Invoke Despair slightly worse. They get one less card and they deal two less damage. So maybe it's even more than just slightly worse. It's just pretty substantially worse. They do have enough mana with the treasures to be able to animate this Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Well, not anymore, but they're going to have pretty good double blocks here, I would say. I'll force them to double block. They want to get this off the board, and then I'll Town-Razer Tyrant this Hive of the Eye Tyrant. And we'll see what they can do with their turn. They only discarded one card, so they should have something good in their hand. Molten Impact. But the Town-Razer Tyrant still has shut off the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. They might have thought they were killing me there, not realizing what Town-Razer Tyrant does exactly. Well, that's not good for me. How many cards exiled by a previous? I think the Seek New Knowledge is exiled by a previous Rahilda. That seems like it would kill me. Yes. Yes, it does. Indeed. One final game. A little bit heavy on the lands to start. Thundering Tyrant's pretty good against their deck, though. When Alchemy first came out, this was like one of the most busted cards in the initial expansion, and it was nerfed a couple of times, and people stopped playing with it, but I think it's still an extremely strong card. And it's even stronger now that I've given it 2 additional power. You can have a Thundering Raiju. It's probably not quite as strong at this point as the City Stalker Connoisseur is. Come on, no Molten Impact. I think they have Molten Impact. It's sad for me. I'm not sure that they could actually afford to attack with their City Stalker Connoisseur. Like, just taking the one hit from the manland that's a lot. And now they have to battle Karlach, the Raging Tiefling. They didn't have it in them. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that. That's a style of deck that really has not been very good in a long time. And I think with the nerf to Meathook Massacre, that kind of deck, I think it could make a comeback. I'm not so sure. The whole like Tiefling sub-theme part of the deck, it was really good. I had that one really busted draw where I drew 2 Tiefling Outcasts and I was on the play. But other than that, they were certainly nothing special. Uthgardt Fury was pretty good. I don't know if it's a card that you necessarily need to play 4 of, but I think having a couple of them, you know, somewhere between 2 and 4 in your aggressive red deck seems good. That Mephit's Enthusiasm card was really strong. I mean, it's still not really, I don't know. It was stronger than Molten Impact would be in this deck, just because this deck does not have many instants and sorceries. So in that sense, it's definitely an upgrade, but it's really not that different from what Molten Impact was offering already. So definitely some cool additions, and nerfing Meathook Massacre makes it a lot more possible to play aggro decks, I would say. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.